Today's session is in the file, Democratizing the Design Process. It's an incredibly important topic and one that I can't wait to find out a little bit more about from the team we have today. We do have Sanya and Philippe from Automattic, and they'll be taking over the reins now. Over to you, folks.
Thanks, Louis. Thanks so much for having us. We're really excited to share some of our experiences with everyone today. So let me see if this is working. Okay. I'm Sanya Grbic, a product designer at Automattic, and I'm based in Berlin.
And I'm Philippe. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal, sunny Lisbon. And I'm a product designer at Automattic, same team as Sanya's, so we work on Jetpack.
So we decided to do a really short introduction so that really we can focus on the topic today. What we'd like to start with is when my experience is when people ask me what I do for a living and I tell them that I'm a designer, they get really excited for me. They say things like, "Oh wow, you must love your job," which is true. But it's really funny that people just assume that. They're like, "Oh, that's just so creative," and I know, Philippe, that you have similar experiences, or
yeah, but also different in an interesting way. I think what I often get is, "Oh, you're a designer. Oh, what does that mean?" Right? So that it's like the design process is so obvious to us that we just assume everyone is familiar with it. And that's what we'll be talking about today, is kind of unveiling more of that process, specifically in your organization, so that you can make your job easier and the process just better for everyone.
Exactly. So what we do, we take some kind of a problem and turn it into a solution, but we take things that are kind of in the unknown and produce something tangible out of it, something that's visual. But the process, as Philippe said, it is most of the time invisible to everyone else. In reality, our process is packed, right, with a lot of stuff that we need to do. And I think as we progress through our careers, we're more and more aware of the process and the steps that we need to take to get from one point to another, to the execution. This here is just an example of a product designer process or a visual design process, and it's not exact. So we're not here to define what design needs to do. It's more about thinking about the perspectives. And when we chatted about this, Philippe, you had an amazing metaphor for what the process looks like.
From the outside, design can feel like a bit of a magic trick, right? There's nothing there, and then suddenly there is something there. And I think it's up to us, design, to kind of surface that or expose that process a bit more of what happens between one stage and the other, so that we cannot just have a better understanding of what the process is, but to involve others, so that by getting more perspectives into the process, we have a better final solution, hopefully. That's the goal here.
Yeah, exactly. And I really liked what you said about magic and how it looks like. It looks like we're like, there's nothing, and then we're like, bam, there's the solution. It looks amazing, and everyone is like, oh, you got it. It was magical. But for us, we went through a very long path. Sometimes we like to use memes at Automattic, so we're gonna use them throughout the presentation. But sometimes it really feels like this. We had a lot of I lost the word, unknown.
Okay, yeah.
And opportunities where we had to choose maybe which way to go, just like in the meme, yeah.
I think the risk here, also worth noting, is that you can do all of that work, pretty siloed, pretty isolated from all your peers, not just design peers, but also marketing folks, engineering folks. So depending on your role, on your company, on your organization, this process can feel pretty siloed. And in reaching the final solution, you might understand at the final stage that that was not the right solution, right? And you can avoid that risk by infusing bits and pieces of what we'll be talking about, like different strategies and methods to make that the solution better in the end, but also the process much easier for yourself.
Exactly. So you invite people to help you on your path to be able to reach a better solution. After, like, especially what you said, when we worked in a siloed way, like we go into our design cave and we do all this work. And in an ideal world, you know, we saw a problem, we saw potential solutions, we found the right one, and we are so convinced that's it, you know, that's the right thing that needs to be done. And in reality, it's never like that. In reality, when we reveal whatever it is that we worked on, people come in actually with questions, with feedback, with different perspectives, and it's time to align with everyone else, because we're not the only people working on a project. This alignment step is actually, and should be, and what we want to advocate for. The alignment step should be part of the design process and not something that comes afterwards. So let's see, in our hypothetical case where we worked on something in isolation and then we came out, and then it's time for feedback. And this is another good meme. Feedback is very often the topic of conversation among designers. Sometimes it can be funny, but actually it's a very, very important part. It's very important to take into consideration what people are saying. They take the time to look at your designs. They take the time to think through. But it's not always ideal, and it's not always what we were expecting. Later on in the presentation, Philippe is going to show some amazing tricks around how to actually guide people to really get the feedback that helps move things forward, right?
Yep. One thing that's probably key to mention here is that if someone is taking the time and investing the time to give you feedback, the least you can do is to acknowledge that feedback and try to understand the feedback, right? So when all of these examples are pretty generic, but if you take a look at can we look more like company X? Can you go to the core of what that means? Maybe that means having more modern layouts, but maybe that just means that the messaging should be better on our site, right? So it's up to us designers, because we understand all of these concepts and we have a much wider range of skills. It's easy for us to, or easier for us than for other people to just get to the root cause of that feedback, acknowledge that feedback, and respond to that feedback. This process alone of including people in those early stages can lead to a much more inclusive process, and make them feel much more included in the process.
Exactly. And if you get something, feedback that's funny looking, or you feel that it's not aligned with the problem that you're solving, it is not the people's fault that there's this kind of, not disagreement, like disparity. Like, it means that you don't have a shared language. Maybe sometimes you will get feedback about a certain thing that you think is something else. Or you just started at different places. You did a lot of research, and then you looked at the competitors, and then you tried out different things, tried out different options. But the person who is giving feedback may not have given it much thought, but had different experiences before you and different perspectives. So what we're trying to say is that it's our job to get everyone onto the same level, kind of, or like get everyone to have the shared understanding of what they're looking at and where the project needs to go. So we have, what do we do with all that, with all the problems and the opportunities that we have there? What we can do is invite people into our process and empower them with the skills, tools, and language that we use every day. We can also deconstruct this a little bit if you want, Philippe, with the different parts.
Yeah, I think we just touched on the language aspect of it, which is someone saying we should be more like company X. Maybe they don't have the language to express what they really feel, and it's up to us. I just saw a comment there. It's perfect. We are educators in a sense, so we have to, like Sonia said, level up and kind of create that baseline so that there's a shared understanding of the language, so that we can then level up skills, but also probably share tools between teams and roles, so that we can operate all on the same assumptions and on the same level. This will ultimately create a trust circle around you, and I think it will be really impactful in the way you do work after this. So you might create advocates for design, for example. You might have a ripple effect throughout your organization by doing this. We've seen some of those results in our experience. So yeah, one thing very important to remind ourselves is, or to remind everyone, is that we're trying to democratize the process, but not the decision making. So that's a very crucial step that either stakeholders or designers should have the control over, or some of the control over, if they do it now. But it's about democratizing the process and not the decision. That's an important step.
Super important, right? To connect this to the beginning, where we were talking about people being excited about design. They think it's a magical process. They think it's a fun process, and they want to be part of it. And after letting people in on this, on what we do daily, you will be friends, you will be allies, you will be enforcing the idea that everyone is on the same team. The thing that you said about trust, Philippe, extremely important. Yeah. So once we include people into the process, the basic principles of it is to let them share their ideas, so be able to speak out, and so that we hear them. Let them participate and feel a little bit of the ownership in the project, and not just feel like they're executing something that someone else came up with. You can get input early in the process, which saves a lot of time on meetings. It saves a lot of time on iterations. Just imagine finishing a project on your own, like designing everything, doing everything, and then you know, some friction happens, like you get into, you realize basically that you went too far into the process, right? To execute where you could have aligned earlier. So we will show you two things today, two examples. We want to say at Automattic, we work asynchronously most of the time because we're a distributed company. So that's a very important aspect of it. And we want to show you two ways of including people in your process. One being sitting together in the same room or being together on a Zoom call. And the other one is super exciting, a completely asynchronous iterative design process. Did you want to add anything, Philippe, to this?
No, that was it.
Yep. We can move
Perfect.
on to the workshop part. So I'll share with you an example of a workshop that you can do at your organization. First, to say why workshops, like when do you need to do a workshop? Let's say when you know that people in other teams have information or ideas, or you want to get them excited about a project, you want to get them to participate, but it's not easy to get that engagement from them. A workshop is great because you actually put people in the same room or a virtual room at the same time. You create a goal, you allocate time for it that's going to be needed, and it's easier for everyone then to participate. And you also create a structure because you know the design process so well. You can create a structure for them and guide them through it. We all know with like different levels of experience, we can get lost in our own process as well. So this guidance is very important. And secondly, you want people to participate and not just observe. So workshop is not about giving someone the results that you created and asking them to comment on them or to like. You want people to participate and work with you on this task. Literally do a little bit of design work together, so that you demystify the process, so that it's not, so it's not like a magic trick. And you give them ownership when they look at this one day in production, or when it's implemented, they can say, oh, I was part of this one idea that I suggested in the workshop actually made it. Yes, so the specific example is the brand look and feel workshop. And oops, sorry. Let me see, where is it? We have this FigJam template as well that we'll share afterwards. That's in the community resources. So let me just move this. Okay, so why this example, the brand look and feel? Simply because visual design is the most mysterious thing, I would say. So it's much easier sometimes to explain a feature, or like a flow, but why some decisions are made on a visual level is super hard to explain. And the brand part is that this particular one you can use, if you go through all the steps, you can use for a rebrand, for example. If there's a rebrand done in an organization, especially if it's done in-house, people can be very attached to what exists. There can be a lot of friction, a lot of obstacles, and the designer's biggest, I think, task is to get everyone excited about it, to get them excited so the people can open up also to some new ideas. The outcome is that of this particular workshop is that you get people to take 20 minutes of their time offline and then 30 minutes of their time in person. And in just this is just 50 minutes. This is like less than an hour. You will have multiple people be excited about the project. You will have them try out a part of the design process. You might have everyone aligned on the vision for the future. Definitely will have people use the same language around the designs that are being done, and they will never look at a design again with the same eyes. I can guarantee that. Let's go through the steps. So I'm just gonna hide these. Oops, where is it? Okay, so that it's a little bit easier for me to present. So step 1 and 2 are the most important ones and can be also done separately and for any type of project. You give the participants, so 4 to 6 participants ideally, you ask them to prepare and find example of, for a rebrand workshop, you want to ask for competitors, because having an overview of the competitors is really, really useful. So you want to ask them to bring examples of competitor websites and products that they like, and also know what it is exactly that they like. You will notice that people bring, now here I will show you a sample of what this could look like. And people will bring very different examples. Some will look at, like designers usually go for the visual stuff. Some will just look at the industry and find something that maybe they enjoy using, or something that's very innovative. Like, you cannot predict this. And that's what's great about including other people. They will bring in something that you are not already bringing. So various examples, various perspectives on why they like certain things. So that's going to be super exciting to discover. Everyone brings 2 examples. You can ask them to do a marketing and product mix, because that's for a rebrand, that can be a point where you can maybe expect some problems depending on like what brand colors you use, but that's a different story. But it's good if you're anticipating some challenges. It's good to also ask for specific things. So they bring this, and you end up with a board. If you have only 4 participants, you end up with a board of 8 different examples with notes of like what they're like. That's your research. That's how designers start their projects, right? You look at what's out there and you note of the things that inspire you and think are useful. And then the second step, which is when the meeting in person, the workshop in person starts, is everyone has 2 minutes to present what it is that they brought in. It's very important to let people speak about it, because they put in the work, they put in the 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe more, and you let them speak out. Everyone is listening. Everyone is taking in all the different perspectives that are being brought in. And if you just take this as an even shorter workshop, you can apply this to a new product, new feature. You can ask, you can do this with engineers, and if you're building a new feature, and just ask them to bring the products that they like using, and discuss the things. Someone will like the flow, someone will like the components, someone will like the features that are being used. And again, you're going to have a really good collection that you can always go back to. If you're doing this for a rebrand or any kind of visual exercise, you may want to get people to connect the language that is normally used to describe designs or any kind of design materials. And you want them to really think about and connect this to a visual language. This is super important to get people to make this connection. So if you want to say, we want to make this design more modern, maybe you get that as feedback. Like, what does that mean? What does modern mean for people? Once they start doing this exercise, they will have to think. They will look at one example and they would say, this one is modern. And then the next one, well, this one is even more modern. So there are levels to it, and they would need to examine, like, why is it that something looks friendly or looks calming or dynamic? The exercise goes like this. You have these empty scales and some dots on the side, and you ask people to evaluate the examples. So everyone goes through each of the examples and they evaluate the look and feel on these scales. You can change what's in these scales to fit maybe the narrative that you're going for, or you can maybe simplify them and just do one line. And in the end, you will see interesting results. People tend to see the same things, and then sometimes they diverge, and maybe when they disagree, it's because it's really not expressed so well inside the design. And then lastly, the steps that are optional are to repeat this exercise. So for this purpose, you would bring examples of what your company looks like currently. you would fill this out before the workshop starts and then reveal it, and then ask people to do the same exercise for what it is that you have today, and then what it is that, where it is that you want to go towards in the future. When you end up with this, you end up basically with this key that really helps you once you go deep into the design exploration. You can go back and say like, okay, we want to move this way. Are we doing that with the designs? But again, it's not about democratizing the decision. It's about inviting people into the process, and you are the one that's guiding everyone. So as I mentioned, you can take this template, this FigJam template, and remix it and use it. Remember, the most important thing about workshops is to include people in the process and get them to do a little bit of the work with you so that they can understand better. Okay, now I'm having, okay, I'm giving, oh, yes, I'm giving you.
Just request a control to take over.
Yeah.
So the other portion that we will be talking about is a more asynchronous way of using some of these methods and some of these practices and applying in a more asynchronous way. That's valid for us because we're a completely distributed company. I don't know if that's the case for you all, but maybe you can pick some of those things and pick and choose from out of these things and use them to your advantage. So we found that good feedback is the product of 3 vectors. And I think it's good to go back to feedback just to reiterate this. So it's a product of questions, timing, and form. And in terms of the right questions are better to elicit that critical thinking. That keeps the options open to be explored, but it channels the critique. So instead of saying just a generic, we need your feedback, you could try to be more purposeful and more intentional in saying, do you think it's a good idea to group all notifications together, for example, or take a look at the prototype above and check if we've missed any steps. In terms of timing, getting the timing right is key, as well as knowing who to involve at which stage. Is it time to involve marketing now? Is it time to talk with engineering to see if the tech specs are, if we have to consider anything surrounding the technical specs of the project? And form, finally, good form elevates the questions and makes the feedback they give you more actionable, which is to just remove any friction you can from people giving you good feedback. It's also worth noting that this applies to us as designer. So it's essential for us to practice this and also work on the soft skills of giving a design critique. One of the examples I usually give is never say you missed the button. Instead, frame it around the work and say, in step 2, the button is missing. So make it passive rather than active. It's not about the person, it's about the work that you're giving feedback to or evaluating or critiquing, right? So that jumps us to our own method of doing things. And we use P2 for all our asynchronous communications. We also use Slack, but P2 is our main channel for communication. And this is just, you can think about it as a blog or a network of blogs, and it's a product created by Automattic to facilitate the internal communication. We use it for project collaboration, trial projects, onboarding new hires, company-wide announcements, even stuff like internal P2s for cooking or music. We have those too. And today we have more than 1,700 P2s, just to give you an idea. You can go ahead and try it if you want to, but I'm just going to explain a bit of how you use it and the tools available in it. So inside P2, we have many building blocks, which we use to communicate with others, involve them, and there's lots of opportunity there to create a compelling story in the way you present your work. There are to-do lists, there are change logs, you can create a survey right there and then. You can style the post however you like. as we designers like to do. The way we've been using this so far is that we've created 2 design iteration templates that allows us to achieve a couple of things. So we have 2 separate templates, one for I1 designs and another one for I2 and plus designs. That means I2, I3, I4. And the goal here is just to remove any of the writing attrition or stress or overthinking about the way you're going to present the work and focus on content instead. A nice side effect to that is that we keep the form consistent throughout our team. So no matter if it's Sanya posting something or I post or me posting something, the form will always be the same. So it creates an expectable format for people to weigh in, to be involved. And we always state the problem, we go over the solution, and we ask for feedback. That's always the way we do things, and we always have that format. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, which is so amazing. So Philippe has been with Automattic for a much longer time than me, and when I joined, he was creating these templates with a few other colleagues, and they help. It was the first time for me using this kind of system, and the templates itself, like not the tool that we use, the templates is what helps me really think about and be intentional about how I'm presenting the work that I'm doing.
Yeah,
so really cool stuff.
Yeah. It's very useful for we found it very useful because if you look at a project, there would be many of these design iterations attached to that project, and these iteration posts build that narrative for the design process. It makes it apparent, it makes it visible for other people to what we've done, what people we are including on that phase, and it builds kind of the history of the project. What feedback was given, who was involved, all of that. This is just setting the stage, because all of the example I'll be talking about, which is a product, an anti-spam product we just redesigned. It uses that same iterative process, and it's based on P2. Everything we did was around P2. So the process was, we had a discovery phase, an exploration phase, many design phases, and then an implementation phase. In all of those, we made sure that we were aligned before moving on to the next stage. So we were aligned on discover before moving on to explorations. We were, you get it, right? Some of that process, people call it sprints. We don't actually use that term, but it could also be interpreted that way. The idea here is not to add any overhead, but to make the process extremely clear for everyone and to bring everyone along the journey. So let's deconstruct these steps a bit more so we can see how we use those to our advantage in this example, and see who we involved. So discover, we were trying to answer the question, who are we building this site for? And so we had a problem in that the business team had an idea in their mind for what the product should be, but design was not aware of that. We could have discussed, we could have made a lot of exercises, but the idea was to learn everything we could from them. So we did a couple of low effort crowdsourcing things. We asked for adjectives / keywords to people that they would associate with the brand. And we used those keywords to create a survey so that people could then weigh in on where in the scale, which Sonia talked about, a bit of those scales, where the brand would align to with those references. We also did some competitor analysis with the marketing team. We took a look at data analytics baseline with the data team. And basically the goal was to set the stage, to get that knowledge from the business team and to get everyone on the same page. Then we moved on to explorations and trying to answer what value should the brand convey. And on this, at this stage, this is actually a screenshot of our P2 post for this phase of the project. And what we did was to take everything we learned before and applied it visually on a consolidated foundation. We also used like a pretty narrative form for the posts, and we presented all of this work as if our colleagues were not, as if they were external customers, so to speak. So we assumed that they were just completely void of context, right? And the way we present something, we all know this as designers, is often more important than what we're presenting. And you want your work to connect to your audience emotionally, and you want to elicit that feedback from them. So for the next stage, we used mood boards pretty effectively to answer the question, what will resonate with our audience, our audience. This allowed it to show something very visual early on without tying it to specifics. So we kind of, we had laid down the foundation for layouts, but then we kind of exploded those layouts and we presented those in 3 different piles so that we were creating our own mood boards. And we asked people 2 questions. What aspect or design resonate with you on a given group and why? And what aspects or design do you think fit our customer base? That's all that this phase was just presenting all those 3 images, no context whatsoever, and then asking them to give us their honest feedback on this work. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I want to add why sharing, why including people early on in the process is hard, because when you share something that's not finalized, people can get confused, right? And they're like, what am I looking at? This is an image of a Zen garden and some typography, like what is it? But when you take, and what Philippe is showing is some really, really nice, I want to say tricks, but like not tricks, but like really nice tips on how to share something that's still a concept and to get the alignment in the early phase of the visual exploration.
Yeah. And so this phase was pretty interesting because we learned a lot from just this exercise. We just simply showed the images and asked those questions, and we got 2 things. We got reassurance and alignment in that people preferred options A and C, not B. That for some reason, people were not vibing with B at all. And we identified challenges very early on in that people were like, we should not be using photos at all because it's hard to convey our metaphors, because it makes the site appear less genuine, all of that. So that allowed us to identify these challenges very early on. The next stage was about storytelling. We worked closely with marketing to answer what should be our customer's journey, and with the business team as well. And what we did as design was just to create all of these flows that were not shared with the entire team at all. So this was just for us to get that the visualization of what the site encompassed, what pages we needed to create, what was the storyline along the site, and what blocks we needed to create to tell that story. And this phase was about storytelling through progression. So we effectively used prototypes to make people feel the site, right? So we didn't show any of those flows. We didn't show any of these images. We showed a prototype for people to go in and test the site for themselves, to navigate through different parts of the site, and to get a real feel for what the site would be. Then the following stage was art direction, and how could we spark that emotional connection. Also very early in the project, we got this piece of feedback, but where is the robot? I don't know if you can read that, but underneath it, that's the robot. That's the, I don't know, this robot must be like 12 years old or something, this illustration. And people that worked on the team for a while, like Sanya mentioned before, they were really attached to this image, but it was up to us to decide if it, or to understand if it was, were they attached to the mascot or were they attached to the metaphor? And so also from past phases, we learned that people were not jiving with photography. So we tried other different approaches, such as illustrations. We took a deep dive into 3D and to explore that metaphor, that anti-spam metaphor, to categorize between this is spam, this is not spam, in a meaningful way that connected with people. And it was purposeful for us to spend an entire iteration on this, because we really wanted the product to speak to the people looking at the product. We really wanted to make that connection with people, and we ended up exploring a bunch of different stuff, including some of those 3D renders you see on the screen.
So basically transforming the robot who was like sorting, right? The spam, exactly. Who was like, this is spam, this is not spam, transforming it into a machine.
An intelligent machine that would, yeah, categorize your comments, and yeah, that's it. And finally, not finally, but the next stages was about bringing it all together. So we refined the designs over a couple of iterations, and we knew at this stage that all of this was the product of collaboration. So we learned that by slowly unveiling the process, I would say more than the product, people got excited about this. And I think the crucial thing here is that alignment comes from repetition. So by aligning everyone, or by repeating the same things over and over again, we got to include every single person that we wanted to at different stages. And then finally, yes, implementation. And we answered the question, how can we break the design apart? Because this was key to us, because the team implementing this was probably not aware of all the design that happened before. And so our work as designers is not done until we ship something. So we have to follow through with the engineers, because if we don't follow through, then the design falls apart, right? So we documented decision, discussed aspects, shared code pen prototypes, all of those things that could bridge the gap between what we've done before and what the site should actually be. And so designers had acquired a lot of knowledge throughout the process that they now had to share to another team. So it was our time to share our knowledge with the development team working on this. And that was it for this process. Whoops. We skipped the meme.
Yeah, we almost skipped the meme. So really, the point is collaborate and let other people in. Don't be like Elsa. That's what we're trying to,
exactly.
to say.
Yep.
Also,
yeah, Automattic is hiring. If you want to work with us, if this part any sort of interest about our processes and about the people working at our company. If you like memes or if you like animated GIFs, that's also a positive thing in our culture. So yeah, and thank you.
Thank you very much, folks. That was really, really great. We've got a few questions. We've just put maybe 5 minutes left, so I just want to ping a few questions at you, if that's all right. The first one is actually coming from Ellie, and the question is about your P2 templates, and they're wondering whether you'd use those for a design systems project as well.
I don't know what exactly that means, but we have a pretty good documented design system that we use. We certainly use those P2, the system, to share what we've done, what we're adding to the system, but not necessarily those templates. Those templates are more for projects, one-off projects that we use to engage people and to, yeah, not necessarily for the design system, I wouldn't say.
Okay, cool. And obviously there's a lot of work that goes into building those kind of templates, and it could potentially seem quite overwhelming for somebody who's starting out. So what advice would you give to somebody who just wants to start something brand new, to get some process, get that ball rolling, to level up their skills in that respect?
Yeah, you'd actually be surprised at how easy it is to create those templates, because they're just building blocks. Like I showed you on one of the slides, they're just building blocks, and you can add them as you'd like, and then you can just save that as your template. I think the hardest part of getting to those templates is more about knowing what the structure should be, knowing what answers you want, what questions you want answers to, and laying down the foundation so that with one template or two templates in our case, you can just, it scales infinitely to whatever we do. So it's more about that storytelling aspect of the post itself. It's more about presenting the problem, presenting the solution, and then asking for feedback or validating that solution with other people.
Great. And then maybe just one last question. This is about organizations that are humongous in scale, and where it's even harder to get most people to turn up live or even get attention asynchronously. So what advice would you give to people, even just for sharing the results? How would you go around making sure that everybody can see what has happened in these sessions?
So if it's a big organization, if it's really hard to get people to participate, you can just try and make it really easy for them. So at the beginning of the Kismet project, what Philippe did, I remember this, Philippe just slacked us and said, what 5 adjectives do you associate with a Kismet? And that was it. And I remember that I was like, okay, I don't have time now. I'll get to it later when I can think about it. And then he pinged me again and he was like, hey, just to remind you of this. And I was like, okay, I have to do it now. And it was so easy for me, actually. I just thought about it and I was like, yeah, these 5 things, I sent it. And he asked a number of people. It was really easy for me to answer this question. And I felt included, and I felt like I shared my ideas, and that's fantastic. So no matter how big the organization is and how little time people have, you can always make it easy for them. Just find the best channel that everyone is using and go for it. It doesn't have to be organized as a workshop. It doesn't have to be,
Yeah, I would add to that and just say that you shouldn't take your current organization or limitations of your current organization as something negative. You can use those to your advantage. So be mindful of people's time, be mindful of the process itself. But most in all, I think you should always consider an MVP before you even consider like affecting everyone at your organization, at your company, everything like that. So thinking locally, but acting globally is probably a good metaphor. But yeah, I would definitely not feel, or try not to feel overwhelmed with the amount of things you have to change at once, but start with the smallest piece of that puzzle that you can affect, so that hopefully has a ripple effect later on, and then you can address, like our P2 iteration templates are not the perfect example for that, but we didn't start with those templates. We started with something completely different, and then we slowly adapted to perfect them, right? So it's easy to look at them now and say they're perfect and they're infinitely scalable for whatever we do, but that was not always the case. And I think that's important to keep in mind, is that whatever you do, try to have a little bit, try to affect some people, try to have that bit of change, and hopefully by doing that, you are aware of the change you're imparting on people, but also affecting the future vision for, or creating your future vision for what you want to achieve.
Great. And then last question is about remote working. I know that Automattic as a company has always been distributed, and lots of people love that idea. Lots of people are a little bit nervous about working fully distributed all the time. So just advice that you have for people who are investigating this or who would like to think about working in a distributed way.
It's really great. We've all seen during the pandemic how going remotely as like a, in a forced way, I want to say, I don't know, like there was no choice. And we all know how that went. And I joined Automattic in September last year, and I can tell you that being at an organization that is intentionally distributed and that has the tools in place, you know, and processes in place to make that happen, there's a huge difference there. It's just constantly being aware of that and just improving the process. The solution is not to be in meetings all the time, for example. Asynchronous work is what makes it work.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. That was a fantastic presentation, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.